Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome back to the ROS Media channel and welcome back to the Equalizer project. Going to be an interesting one today. We've got a subject matter lined up for you that we have entitled Fact versus Perception. And what we want to do here is really dig into the narrative that is on the internet surrounding Ian. So, welcome back, Ian. We want to dig into that side of things. But also, I think for context, it's important that people understand the facts as well, that they understand track record, and then people can balance one against the other rather than just following what is readily available on the internet. We all know Google never lies, of course. So, when people look on the internet, it's always the first thing that comes up on page one of Google. And people's perception is that if it's at the top of the search rankings and it's right there at the very top, it must be true, it must be verified, it must be real. So want to really dig into that today. And the first thing that I want to talk about is establishing the factual track record. So, if you're watching this for the very first time, if you've never met me, if you've never met Ian before, or if you've just maybe joined the Republic of Old Souls Private Members Association and you're looking into some of the content, maybe it would be good for you to understand who's actually steering this ship. So when it comes to Ian, let's start with some of the facts before any of the online narrative that's out there. What has Ian's documented professional record actually shown over the years? I mean, you've got a 40-year track record, haven't you, Ian, in financial engineering, for one thing, from arbitrage models to sort of pension deficit solutions, algorithmic FX systems. There's a whole plethora of different things that you've done. I mean, maybe we could just cover some of those to begin with. Let's talk, for example, a lot of the narrative on the internet is to do with the FCA. So maybe we could start there, because I believe you had 20 years plus with an FCA license without any disciplinary history, any prior conflicts of any nature. So maybe that would be a good sort of opening point to start with.
Yeah, I mean, it's for a lot of people who are going to watch this, the world that I've lived in is probably a very different world from the world that they live in. We all live in different worlds. We've all got our own frame of reference, and we've all had different experiences. I came out of when I was a kid, all I ever wanted to do was to play football. It was my passion. My dad had been offered a professional football contract. My uncle had been offered a professional football contract. And interestingly, my dad didn't actually play professionally because he had a car accident, and so did I. So there was a bit of a thing running in the family. We both had car accidents just before our careers were about to take off, and I had to go in a new direction. And I was absolutely devastated because I loved football so much that it was like, to me, it was like take football out of my life when I was a kid, and I didn't know what else I was going to do. That was my passion. That's what I lived and breathed for. And, I could never get enough. I'd literally play every single day if I could. And if there was no actual match, I'd go down the park and see if there's any kids knocking a football around so I could get involved. So that used to be my passion. And, at the age of 18, head-on car collision ruined my upper and lower spine, and suddenly your career's gone, and all sorts of other consequences, materialized after that. I did play again, but 20 years later, after some surgery that came in, I never played at the same level, and I was superly frustrated that I couldn't do what I used to be able to do when I was 18. Anyway, that's the story for today, but it kind of gives you a little bit of background, because I am a real man. I do have feelings. I have aspirations. I have my own personality. I have my own history. And I think a lot of this is lost when you look at internet blogs. I am a real. I'm not an AI. I'm not a hologram. I'm a real man, right? I've been married twice. I'm in my third marriage at the moment. I've had a lot of experiences. I'm 60, like we all have. I've had a huge life of experiences. I've lived a big life. I haven't lived a small life. I lived a big life. I've had all sorts of business experiences. I've had all kinds of life experiences that I've had to learn, like we all have. I'm not saying I'm any different, but along that journey, you begin to, I think you begin to realise what your talents are and what they're not. And although I was talented at football, when that's taken away, you've got to find something else, haven't you? And that's what I did. I went into financial services when I was 18 and a half.
Okay.
And this was in the early to mid 1980s. Now, it's quite significant because when I started in financial services, there was no regulatory constraints, and it's quite significant, right? Because you could be a bricklayer in the day, and then in the evening you could be out there advising people on financial services. Literally, you could be the milkman in the morning, and in the afternoon you could be the financial guru who's advising people on what to do with their money. Literally, and I'm not joking when I say that. That's exactly how it was. And then in 1987, financial regulation came in, and I could talk all day long about this, I won't, but basically it came in, and people who were in the financial services industry, wealth managers or financial planners is the jargon terms that people use. Suddenly you had to lift your game. Suddenly there were professional standards that came in, right? No longer could you just do and say whatever you wanted, and there was literally no consequences. Like Wolf of Wall Street, if you've ever watched that movie, it was a bit like that when I got into it, right? It was all about selling. It was all about making money and selling. And then suddenly there was professional standards introduced in 1987. And you had to be benchmarked against professional standards. And then you had to get qualifications. And it's like, oh my God. And an industry of maybe 300,000 financial planners, wealth managers, suddenly that was trimmed right down. I think about 70–80% of those individuals that used to be involved in it suddenly no longer were. Why? Because you had to be professionally qualified. No longer could you just turn up and say you're a financial advisor or you are a wealth manager. Then you had to prove it.
So exams and qualifications and all that stuff at that point, you
had to take courses and you had to study and you had to get qualification. And that's what I started to do in the late 1980s. And not that many people would probably know this, but there is a professional body called the Chartered Insurance Institute. And as far as I know, it's still running today. And if you wanted to practice, because it was then practicing like a doctor or a lawyer, you get these professional qualifications, and now you can practice. You can run a practice as a professional. But only if you've got the entry requirements of the qualifications. So I did that. I did the entry level, and it was all of the certificates were issued by the Chartered Insurance Institute. That's the late 80s. I did about 2–3 years, all sorts of subjects in relation to money management, basically, just to keep it simple. And I passed with distinction on every subject. Why? Because I liked it, because I enjoyed it, because I really understood it. Everything I was studying made a load of sense to me.
I have to say, for an 18-year-old to go into financial services in itself sounds unusual, certainly in this day and age. I can't imagine many 18-year-olds, when I think back to when I was 18 and possibly when I look at my own children and think, what were they doing when they were 18? To actually choose that as a pathway in itself is an unusual pathway for somebody to choose. So clearly you enjoyed it. Clearly you'd found something that you were also quite passionate about as well.
Well, you see, when I started studying it, and it's a lot bigger subject than it appears. It's not just people taking mortgages out. That's. I never did mortgages, by the way. I never ever. I've never once set somebody's mortgage up for them. So a lot of people think that financial services is mortgage brokering. And well, it probably is to a lot of people, but it wasn't to me. I wanted to play the game at a much more professional level than just being a mortgage broker or a loan broker, which a lot of people think that's what literally, if you ask people, what do you think financial services guys do? Oh, they do mortgages, don't they?
Mortgages,
that's the only frame of reference they've got. Well, it's like a lot of subjects. There's a million things going on in the world that you have no concept of going on. And that's why I was fascinated by it. It was a big subject. Life insurance, pensions, investments, trusts, law, custody, administration, all manner of things, pensions, actuary stuff. The subject is vast. It's a vast, vast subject. And I loved it. My brain loved it. And I understood it. And when I did the exams, I was never worried about whether I was going to pass the exams because I knew it. I just knew I was going to be all right because I knew it. Strangely enough, at school, because I was going to be a pro footballer, I literally did not attend school in the 4th and 5th year of senior school.
Okay.
So I left school with literally zero qualifications, right?
No O levels, no A levels, none of that stuff, no?
No, none of that stuff.
Well, we have something in common there as well because I left school. I was actually taken out of school at the age of 11, believe it or not, because there was a national teachers strike going on in the early 80s, around 81. And the school that I was attending at the time was... I think to call it St. Trinian's was a bit of an understatement. The kids were running riot. They literally were setting fire to the chemistry lab, blowing things up, throwing mud in the swimming pool. All sorts of stuff were going on. And my parents took the decision to take me and my brother out of school at the age of 11 and home educators, which I absolutely hated, in all honesty. Sounds great, don't have to go to school, but sat in your bedroom all day on your own, reading textbooks and going through material because there wasn't a lot of support for home education back then. But because we'd been taken out of education, you couldn't then just suddenly go back into the system to take your exams. They didn't allow that. So I, on my 16th birthday, finished what I was doing and went straight into work with no qualifications. So like yourself, I've got no A levels, no O levels, nothing at all.
No. I've got two older sisters, and they both were academic A grade stars. They passed everything A grade, A levels, uni, all that stuff. They went down that pathway. I didn't go down that path because I thought I was going to play football, and quite frankly, I didn't like school very much because it was a load of nonsense to me. So none of it made any sense, and that's why I didn't bother going. I literally I just played snooker. In the daytime, and I don't mind admitting it. I got pretty good at snooker, by the way, because I was down the snooker hall most of the time. So that if people want to know me, that's what I did. I wasn't this. I didn't go to a silver spoon school. I went to a comprehensive school. It was rough and tumble. You had to survive in the jungle. There was no niceties in the school I went to. I can assure you. If you didn't stand up for yourself, you were going to be bullied. And I got a lot of bullying because I was very good at football. And a lot of the guys in my school who were older than me bullied me or tried to bully me because I was playing I was playing football 2 years ahead. So I'm like 13, I'm playing in the under 15s. I was 14, I was playing in the under 16s. And a lot of the kids in my school didn't like that because they thought I was showing off. I wasn't, I was just good at football. And you got a lot of bullying. I was also good at athletics. I ran in the All England final at 400 meters. And a lot of guys didn't like that either because, you know, I was good at football and athletics, and a lot of guys didn't like it. So they tried to bully me. And that's one of the reasons I didn't go to school, because I was permanently fighting people. Literally every few days there was a major fight going on. So in the end, I thought, you know what? I'm not going to bother going. I'm just going to go and play snooker. I quite enjoy that. And I'm going to play football anyway. So why do I need to learn all this nonsense? Which to me, it was utter nonsense that they were trying to teach me. It made no sense to me. I didn't want to know it. And I was bored stiff. So I just went and played snooker. So that's a little tiny bit of my, you know, my backstory. And then when I got into financial services, it all started making sense to me. This is a subject that I could really master and really become an expert in. And between 18 and 21, I worked for, I did work for an insurance company, not unemployed. I wasn't employed. I was on commission only because they didn't used to give jobs out. You couldn't get a salary. It was all, you know, you had to bring the business in, and you were paid commission for bringing in business to the insurance company. I did that for about 18 months. I became the #1 in the whole country at 19 and a half. So there was a whole country. There was about 200 sales reps in the entire country. And by the end of the period of time that I was there, I was the top earner in the entire country under the age of 20. And I wasn't because I was amazing at selling. It's because I was a problem solver. And then I moved to a friendly society called the Tunbridge Wells Equitable. It's still going today, TWEFS. And I was in my, I think I was 20. I was headhunted. I went there, and they actually had a small salary, which is unbelievable. They actually paid you like 30 quid a week or something, as well as you got commission, right? And nobody in the industry got a salary. You know, it's very different from today's world, right? So suddenly I've got this small salary, and they even gave me a company car. And it's like, wow, I've got a company car and I've got a salary. I must have arrived, right? And I became the top producing agent, because they used to call them agents, in the Tunbridge Wells Equitable. And then at 21 and a half, I decided that I would set up a independent wealth management practice. And that's what I did. And it's still running today.
Years of age. Okay.
At 21 and a half, I set up Independent Financial Solutions, which is still running today in the south coast of England.
Okay.
And I don't know whether it was the run by the youngest guy in the UK, but I must have been one of the youngest guys to set up a professional wealth management practice at the age of 21 and a half.
Yeah.
I don't know of anybody else who ever did that, but I did, and I loved it. The problem I had was that the majority of my clients who wanted to come with me when I was at the Tunbridge Wells Equitable, I was prohibited from taking them with me.
Yeah.
There was constrictive covenants on my contract.
Yeah.
So even though my clients wanted to come with me,
they couldn't.
I was barred. So I literally started with no clients whatsoever.
Okay.
At 21 and a half. Now, if you then move into the environment at the time, you had high interest rates, right? You had 16% interest rate.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, yeah? People think.
I can remember that. And around 1990, 1991, it was, there was so many people that were in negative equity situations and repossessions here, there, and everywhere, weren't there? They were remortgaging at 110, 115, 120% mortgages back then, weren't they? Just to keep in the house.
Yeah, I mean, in the late 80s, I had 3 mortgages. I was building up a portfolio of property, and I could see that was an interesting thing to do. And I had 3 mortgages, and then suddenly the interest rate goes to 16%, and you've just started a wealth management practice with no clients. That's a bit tough,
Very.
And you have to survive, And I'd also just got married, and I had to survive. And the only way I could survive was to build my client base. So what did I do? I couldn't go around knocking doors or cold calling people through the telephone. So what I did was I went to accountants first, and I offered accountants. Basically, I used to ring up the accountant's office and speak to the reception, and I'd say, look, what's the availability of your partners taking on a new client? Oh yeah, we've always got room to take on a new client, they used to say. And I said, well, I've just started a new business and I'd like to come and have a meeting with one of your partners to see whether there's a synergy fit between what you're doing and what I'm doing. Can I pay for an hour with an accountant?
Okay.
What are they going to say? They say, okay, fine, yeah, we'll book you in Tuesday, So there I turn up with my suit and tie and all that stuff I used to wear back in those days.
Yeah.
And my briefcase at 21 and coming up 22. And I sat down with a partner of an accountancy firm. And I did this all over the South Coast, by the way. And I sat down and I said to the accountant, I said, look, cards on the table. I've just started a wealth management practice and I want to see whether I can help you with your financial planning. And what kind of a reaction are you going to get? You're a 22-year-old lad. You're now in a chartered accountancy office talking to one of the partners who's probably in their 40s, 50s or 60s, because there weren't very many young chartered accountants around, I can assure you. Yeah. And I'm there saying I want to help them with their finances. Yeah, can you imagine what kind of a reaction that you get? Yeah, yeah. So I said, look, the bottom line is this: if you give me an hour, I'm going to ask you what you want and what you need from your finances, and then I'm going to compare it to what you've got, and then I'm going to write you a report, and I won't charge you for it. But if you don't get any value out of my report, at the end, when I deliver it back to you, I'll pay you your hourly rate for this hour. So you can't lose, can you? I'm either going to pay you or I'm going to come up with ideas that you may not have seen in your own finances.
That's going to benefit
you might on them, yeah? It's a no-lose situation, right? Well, I did that and I went away and nobody was doing report-based financial planning. I started doing it. I literally went away with what they wanted, what they needed. I had a whole series of questions I asked them. And then I went away and typed a report up. Because this is way before computers. There wasn't word processing. Nope. I was there with a typewriter writing a report for an accountant on how I could improve their finances as a 22-year-old lad. And that is how I grew my wealth management practice. I then recruited loads of chartered accountants. They saw the value of what I had written in my reports. Many of them became my clients, and then they started referring their clients to me. Gotcha. And then I moved into lawyers. I did exactly the same with lawyers in my local area. Yeah. Within a few years, I was one of the biggest wealth management practices on the south coast of England. And I had clients driving to see me from all over the UK. So if I'm a fraudster, if I have no track record, if I don't know what it is that I'm doing, why would all these chartered accountants, lawyers, have come to me for me to manage their finances for them? Why would that happen? Yeah, ask the question. Yeah, and I'll take a lie detector. It's absolute gospel truth what I've just said. By the time I got to my early 30s, I could not cope. I had so many clients. I literally had no more time left. I had to grade my clients. I used to cull them every year because I could only keep a certain number of them. It's impossible to, if you are a wealth manager for thousands of people, they all think that you are they're the only client you've got.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. So I had to cull them. I recruited a team of other wealth managers to work with me so that I could delegate clients to them. Okay. Nobody wanted to be delegated because they all wanted to have their time with me. And I soon realized that I had to move away from the client interactions and start to develop product. So that's what I did. I moved into product design. Okay. And I split my time between advising high net worth individuals on their finances, and then developing solutions for a much bigger market where the wealth managers in the industry would actually recommend my plans to their own clients.
Okay.
So that was my progression. In my early to mid 30s, I started to get involved in developing solutions for a much wider audience where I never actually sat down with the end user. The products and programs that I developed, I promoted through wealth managers to their clients. Okay. And that's where I progressed, simply because I couldn't cope. I had too many clients. I was a victim of my own success. My method worked so well that I was turning people away, literally. So, again, if I was a fraudster, you don't turn clients away, do you?
No.
You hoover them up.
Take anybody and everybody on, wouldn't you? Yeah. No, I get that. So we've
Turn
got a 40-year track record here is basically what we're talking about in a nutshell, isn't it? 40 years in financial services, financial engineering, 20 plus years with an FCA license without any disciplinary history along that time frame, qualifications with distinction as well. You've also built Integrity Financial Solutions into major wealth operations. There's the history with HBOS, where you were backed by HBOS with an unlimited line of credit, I believe, from that bank. The list is very long here when it comes to what you've achieved over that period. So people have to ask themselves, well, why is that record not mentioned in the public domain for context? And how does that level of technical depth compare to the way that you are portrayed online right now? Would be some of the questions that I think people should be asking if they're looking for facts. Talk to me a little bit about the shift, because obviously you've had this amazing career, created a lot of wealth for other people, created a lot of wealth for yourself as well over the years. You said you'd lived a big life, and we've spoken about that before on interviews as well, in terms of the properties that you've had, and just the trappings and the lifestyle. You understand what it's like to live that type of lifestyle. But then clearly there was this big shift, wasn't there, where you started whistleblowing on some of these organizations. And I want to look at that. I want to look at the whistleblowing side of things, and what's the context when it comes to that, because the record shows that you blew the whistle on £1 billion worth of HBOS fraud. And this is the bank, this is the institution that gave you an unlimited line of credit. There was a 40 billion hole in the balance sheet. There was something called Arc Estrella as well that you may want to touch on. I want people to understand context here, because I think it's important that we look at real context when we're just assessing the current situation, the current narrative that's online, the hostility that you've had. So could you just kind of walk us through some of this whistleblowing that's happened over the years, and the shift away from where you were to where you're at now?
Yeah, it's a massive tipping point. And so I went from this wealth management practice with too many clients, and then I started to develop solutions for the industry, the financial services industry. So for 5 to 10 years, I was developing solutions. I've taken on complex problems, developing a solution, and then rolling that out through wealth management firms. I had hundreds of wealth management firms that came to my firm for solutions that they could promote to their own clients. I got invited to meet up with Saga, and I've mentioned this on one of my previous interviews. So Saga came to me and said that they were looking to solve a big problem in creating income from property. I had a meeting with their board. I cut it short. Basically, I developed a program that enabled people to use their property to generate a safe income without any loss to the property, with total freedom to sell the property and to keep the value of the property. And I developed a solution and I rolled it out and I presented it to some major financial services players, Prudential Insurance Company. They took it on board. I presented it to obviously Saga. They had the clients, 5-6 million clients who wanted to buy into it and execute upon it. And I needed a bank. I needed a bank because there was an arbitrage. I won't go into all the technical stuff, but basically it was an arbitrage that I needed a bank credit line. And I had a meeting with I was introduced to HBOS. It was Bank of Scotland. This is in 1999, 2000. I already had a track record of developing a whole range of solutions that wealth management firms were promoting. So I wasn't just turning up with an idea. I had a track record of developing solutions for people's problems, not only my own clients, but also solutions that wealth management firms were recommending to their clients, right? So I went to this meeting, long story short, because I've told this story before. I had a meeting at the kind of the lower level of this bank. They loved what I was talking about, what my proposition was. Before I knew it, within a month, I'm now sitting in with the higher echelons of Bank of Scotland in Edinburgh.
Okay.
And they absolutely love what I have presented and they want to do it. They want to get involved in it. It was called the Enrichment Plan. It's in my documentary, The Disruptor. That was the beginning of what I thought at the time was like, I've just gone in the newsagent and I've bought a £1 lottery ticket and I've come up with the winning numbers. Literally. I'm talking with a bank that is one of the world's most ambitious banks. And my idea of how to solve this home income solution wasn't just for the UK, it was worldwide. This is like, for me, having been a product architect and a developer and a designer and an inventor's mind, I've now got a bank that wants to back me on this plan with some major other financial services players like the Prudential, one of the biggest, world's biggest insurance companies, and Saga, one of the biggest retirement companies in the UK, if not the biggest. And all these guys are backing me, right? Want to do this plan. I remember it at the time. I was thinking, I was like, to shake yourself. It's like, is this really happening? Because somebody's taken my ideas and my technical ability, and they actually agree with me. Now, I didn't just write an idea down on a bit of paper and have a meeting. I had a full forensic presentation. I had a firm of actuaries. If you don't know who actuaries are, they're deep mathematicians. They work in insurance. They crunch numbers. They're risk managers, right? They are off the chart intelligent people in mathematics. Have a look at what actuaries do. You'll understand what I'm talking about. My models were put through actuaries. I built financial models that went through actuarial scrutiny. The bank wasn't going to give me an unlimited credit line unless my models checked out. And they did check it. And the bank offered me a contract. And then they withdrew it and replaced it with another one, which is where I ended up with the what is commonly called the GTEPs, Geared Traded Endowments. It was never my name. It was a name the regulator gave. So it leads up to the whistleblowing, right? Because then over the next 10 years, the Bank of Scotland that became Halifax Bank of Scotland, that then became Lloyds Bank, basically provided an unlimited credit line where I became my firm was the product provider of an arbitrage investment product where the bank put in a credit line and I put in assets and my firm managed the assets. Me and my firm managed the acquisition of the assets and the assets themselves, which were life insurance with profit assets. I won't go into all the jargon.
No.
There's no need, right? But basically, it was a very popular proposition. And my firm won numerous product design awards in in the period between 2001 and 2009. In 2007, my firm, because we used to bank with Royal Bank of Scotland, my firm won the most profitable company in the UK award from Royal Bank of Scotland in 2007.
Wow. Okay.
And my firm was valued at that time, and I'm only saying this because it's the truth, at £120 million valuation in 2007.
So you see,
just before the alleged credit crisis, right?
Yeah.
Now this was because of the product range that I had developed. It wasn't just one product. There was 12 financial planning solutions that my firm was promoting through wealth managers. We were looking to take it international, and we had a 6 month waiting list for the wealth managers' clients coming in and buying our programs.
Okay.
It's unheard of, Andy. I mean, in investment, right? Normally, the investment manager, the investment operator is begging you to come and invest in their program, right?
Yeah. You got a 6 month waiting list.
A 6 month waiting list because we couldn't fulfill, because the demand was way bigger than the fulfillment, because we had to go and acquire the assets, and that I had a whole industry of people doing that for me. My firm was 200 members of staff.
Yeah.
So we're not talking a little shop with a couple of part-timers. We're talking of a major organization, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly I'm offered a deal by the Bank of Scotland at the highest level in and around 2008, when the financial crisis was starting to unfold, the alleged financial crisis. They knew what they were going to do. They were going to take the assets from all of these investment programs. They were just going to hoover them up and take them. And they told me that's what they were planning to do before they did it. And they wanted to know whether I was going to be with them on that program or against them on that program. Well, I obviously wasn't with them on that program.
No.
Because I spent my entire career building up my reputation and building up my organization to get to the level I got to. Why on earth would I join in with a plan that was going to devastate my own clients' livelihoods?
Yeah.
I wasn't going to do it, right? No matter how much they offered me, I was not going to do that. So that's when I started looking deeply into why would they offer me that deal? So it all makes sense, right? Why would a bank that is one of the world's fastest growing banks at that time want to steal the assets from basically the account holders in these investment programs that my firm was administering / managing, right? Why would they want to do that? I started looking, and I discovered that the balance sheet of HBOS was completely in the matrix, right? Let's not talk about public and private. Let's just talk about in the matrix, right?
Yeah.
Banks have got capital ratios that they've got to comply with, right? You can't just run a bank and recklessly run it with no capital, right?
No.
You've got to have a balance sheet that is consistent with all the Basel regulations. There's a whole range of financial regulations that you've got to comply with, right? In the matrix. Now, I started looking at why would they be offering me this deal? Why are they planning to take the assets from the account holders? What's going on? I started looking, and I discovered a huge balance sheet hole. And now this is so significant because it is the tipping point for my entire life, right?
Yeah.
The football tipping point, the car accident is one big tipping point. This next thing is the next great big tipping point for me, right? Because what I discovered was that the regulator was covering up. That is the Financial Services Authority, the Bank of England, and the United Kingdom Treasury were covering up the fact that Bank of Scotland, that had become Halifax Bank of Scotland, had been trading insolvent since 2005.
Okay.
What we're talking about here, Andy, just in case the audience doesn't realise the significance of this, right? You can't run any company that's insolvent. It's a criminal activity to run a company insolvent, right? Now go and run a publicly listed bank i.e. a bank that is listed on the FTSE 100 stock exchange.
Yeah.
And mislead all of the shareholders in the bank, because the bank is actually bankrupt. Literally, on paper, this bank is running insolvent. It is bankrupt. And I started talking internally about that. You know, I wasn't threatening them. I was saying, look, I know what's going on here. You know, my firm had a joint venture with the bank.
Yeah.
So, you know, I wasn't just some guy with an account. I've got a joint venture contract with the bank.
Yeah.
My entire organization is relying on this joint venture.
Yeah.
Pretty big deal for me, right?
Yeah.
So I then blew the whistle, thinking at the time that the regulators would actually take notice
and listen.
might do something.
Okay.
And this is the beginning of my realization that the whole of the financial services market worldwide is protected by the regulators, because they did absolutely nothing. Apart from a year or so later, they completely destroyed my firm and made me into the scapegoat for a big part of the bank's theft of assets. £1 billion worth of theft.
Yeah.
That's my clients' assets that they stole.
Yeah.
Right. So this is the beginning of the problem. So now I've moved into a new world, right? I'm now in this new world of suddenly Ian, who's had this stellar reputation for years without any issues, regulatory problems, no complaints of any nature, no lawsuits, nobody saying, oh, Ian, you're a fraudster and anything like that. Suddenly, my firm is being destroyed in a very clever strategy to destroy it. And all over, not just the local newspapers, the front pages of national newspapers has got my picture. You're on the television, 2 television programs where people are accusing you of being, you know, into fraud and ripping people off, right? Yeah. Because the bank had stolen the assets and I got the blame for it. So that is, you know, you've got whistleblowing that then leads to the complete and utter annihilation of your reputation. And that was in 2010, 2011.
I want to stop you there for a second, Ian. I want to stop you there for a second, because this has never been covered in the interviews that we've done. And I'm going to ask this because, you know, you've told us a little bit about your childhood and your passions, but I think this has been glanced over. At that point, when you're on national TV, you're on the front of all the newspapers, having had this stellar reputation, having been an award-winning architect of these solutions, how did that feel?
Oh, well, I mean, I can't describe how that feels, because, you know, when you're passionate about what you're doing, as I always have been, right? I've never done anything half-heartedly. I was totally passionate about making a difference, making a positive difference for people. I was never driven, but I've said this before, and I've never ever been driven by money. I couldn't give a toss about money. I literally don't even know what's in the bank account. I don't want to know. I just want to do a good job, right? So my programs were doing a very good job for the people that bought them. I did all manner of things. We're going to have a whole program on all the things I designed and developed, because I love solving problems, right? I love it. It's what I love doing. Now, you go from being a guy who's been revered, who's winning awards, and his company is doing really well, so well that you're turning customers away or keeping them waiting for 6 months because you can't fulfill their demand for your programs. You go from that to suddenly, within almost a heartbeat, you're on the front page of newspapers. There's 2 television programs being made about you, and then you suddenly realize what journalism is all about, right? Because journalists don't come and interview and say, hey, we're going to run a TV program about you, Ian, and we want to know your side of the story. or the national newspaper doesn't ring you up and say, hey, you know what, we're going to run a front page news story about you and what you've been allegedly doing. We want to get your side. No, they just run the stories, right? Now, I remember, and this is very relevant, right? The Financial Times ran a story about me, and I got to hear about it before they published it. So I rang up the Financial Times. I rang up the press office and I said, look, you're going to run a story on me, and I want you to get my side of it before you publish it. And I got put through to the editor of the Financial Times, right?
Okay.
Unusual in itself, right? And I spoke to this fella and I said, look, what you're going to publish is fabrication. You want to know the real story. You want to know that I'm a whistleblower. You want to know that I discovered the bank's black hole. You want to know that there's a major cover-up by the regulator of the bank's failure and the fact it should have gone bust 5-6 years before it was taken over by Lloyds Bank. That's the story you want to be running. You don't want to be running the story about me being this rogue that's cost people their livelihoods, which I didn't. And he said to me, yeah, but the story about you is much more interesting, Ian. And I said, but it's not true. Because I naively thought that they were going to try and write about the truth, right? And he said to me, nah, there's a bit of momentum in the story about you, so we're going to carry on writing that story, right? And I said to him, but, I'll sue you if you write it. And he said, you know what, Ian? He said, we've heard that one before. We've got a bigger budget than you. So what are you going to do? And that's basically the media, right? In a nutshell.
Yeah.
And I've had many run-ins with the media since. That's their attitude. It's like, who are you? We're the Financial Times. We can out-muscle you. We've got more money than you. We've got more friends in high places than you. So if you want to take us on, you're welcome to have a go. Yeah. But you probably won't win it. And that's basically what the guy told me.
Okay.
If you're hard enough, come over here, basically. And we'll have a scrap. That's basically it. So what do you do? So whistleblowing. And then a few years later, having had my licenses, because when you practice financial services, you have to have licenses, right? It's not one license. I've mentioned this before. If you're going to run all different financial programs, they call them permissions, which is interesting in itself. Yeah, you have a permission to do something. Yeah, which is quite ludicrous in what I'm doing today. But if you manage in all different aspects of financial services programs, there are a whole list of permissions that you have to have. You can't just go and do stuff. You have to have these professional permissions, and they're granted. You don't just get on and do it and hope for the best. You have to apply for permissions, right? And my firm had all these different permissions to do all these different things. So if you then go forward, and the fact that having had my firm destroyed, which I've told on my documentary how they did it, very cleverly destroyed my firm and made me the scapegoat, right? Then what happens then is that I still had a lot of people who believed in me, right? And I was approached by a guy called Richard Clay, who ran an organization called Arc Australia. And he had contracts with the Hilton hotel chain, right? So he had won a contract to build 80 Hilton hotels in the UK. He was into construction. He was a chartered accountant, by the way. Okay. And he was also very well connected in Nottingham with all sorts of high and mighties. And he came to see me one day. His office called my office. And he wanted to come and see me. I won't go into the whole story, but basically he came to see me in his helicopter. I still had a huge house back in those days. He landed in the grounds of my house. We went to my office. It was a very impressive presentation he gave me. And I decided to enter into 3 joint ventures with him, with his firm, which I did. Okay. He brought his lawyer with him. He brought his architect with him. And basically, they wanted to raise money to finance 80 Hilton hotels. And I put together an investment program that would be able to do that. Again, I'm not going to go into all the detail because we'll be here for all day long. Yeah.
I get it.
Basically, I put the solution together, and I went out there and I started raising funds for this particular investment proposition, which is quite a large amount, 80 hotels.
I can imagine.
It's quite a large amount, yeah. And I was out there raising the capital for it through a financial program that I put together, because even though my firm had been destroyed, there were still a lot of people in the wealth management area who believed in me, but just couldn't visibly work with me. So they still believed in me, but they knew that if they worked with me openly, that they would be destroyed by the regulator, because it's like a mafia type operation, right? So quietly, people would work with me, but not publicly, right?
Gotcha.
So I set up an international investment program. I started raising funds through it for the financing of the 80 hotels. And I also, at that time, I became a pensioner trustee for a pension scheme called the Hampton Dean Pension. And that was Richard Clay's. He was running a capital raising program, and he was putting funds into this pension scheme from retail consumers. I became the pensioner trustee, which is a very serious position to take, right?
Yeah.
And I did an audit on what he was doing, and it was outright 100% fraud on every level. So what did I do? I withdrew from all of the joint ventures that I'd started with Richard Clay. I lost £2 million of my own funds because I withdrew from all the ventures, and I blew the whistle on Richard Clay and Catherine Clark to the FSA, as it was back then. That's the financial regulator, to Companies House, to the pension schemes office, and to the serious fraud. And they did nothing at all.
Nothing.
They did nothing at all.
So that venture continued. People's money was being plowed into those ventures.
My ventures didn't continue. Richard Clay's ventures continued.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
I backed out of working with him and lost a load of money in the bargain.
As a result,
I spent 18 months developing a whole range of joint ventures with his firm, and I had to pull out of all of them, and I lost a huge amount of money. I still had about 80 staff on my payroll at the time. And I was still bankrolling a big organization, even though I wasn't running the financial services programs as I used to. I still was doing other things. And I still had a big team, and I still had a big overhead. And I bankrolled it. And then I withdrew because I had integrity to withdraw, right? Again, if I was a fraudster, I would have carried on with Richard Clay. By the way, he offered me a £10 million bribe to stay in business with him.
Wow. This begs the question, and if you're watching this, you need to be asking some questions here. You really do. Why would a whistleblower who is challenging what could only be classified as systemic banking fraud here potentially face long-term retaliation from these huge institutions? Why would somebody do that without good reason? Why? And lose a ton of money in the process as well. Have companies destroyed, lose personal finances. The big question that people should be asking is, why would you do that if there wasn't good, solid grounds and reason to do it in the first place?
You see, the thing is, Andy, that I literally don't care whether people believe me on this or not. I literally don't care. There's enough people who do believe me, by the way. And I have always operated from a position of honor and integrity, right? And I know a load of people are going to go, yeah, but look at all these things on the internet. I get it. But you don't build a platform that I built over nearly 30 years if you don't have honor and integrity. You don't blow the whistle on one of the biggest, most powerful banks in the UK if you have no integrity yourself. You don't blow the whistle on one of the biggest fraudsters that's walked the planet, Richard Clay and Catherine Clark, who Clay went to jail for 10 years for his fraud, right? That I blew the whistle on 4 years before he was arrested and 5.5 years before he was jailed. And if the FSA, as it was then, had taken notice, of my whistleblowing, 50 million of people's money would have been saved from his frauds. Yeah,
okay.
That's the bottom line, right? You don't blow the whistle if you are a fraudster yourself, do you?
No. No.
What burglar is gonna go down the police station and say, hey, I was doing a burglary last night and I noticed over the road was another burglar and I'm blowing the whistle on the guy on the other side of the road. Yeah. You don't do it if you're a wrong 'un. You don't blow the whistle, I can assure you.
No. This is the context that I think people need to hear, need to see. They need to see the real you. They need to see the background. They need to see the accreditation and the work that you've put in over 30 to 40 years of your life, half your life, doing this with no issues, no regulatory problems, nothing but accolades and waiting lists of people to work with you, versus now what I would like to move into, which is the perception. So we've looked at fact, and this is fact. This is out there in the public domain. It's just that people don't choose to dig deep enough to find it and look at the historical evidence of what has actually happened prior to what they're seeing on the internet now. So let's do the contrast. Let's look at, we've looked at your history. We've looked at the whistleblowing and that big shift in terms of what's happening now. Let's look at fact versus perception. So what I want to talk about now is this internet narrative, because there's a lot of it around. And I want to look at the differential between what I would consider to be proper due diligence versus just constant regurgitation of the same material, the same narrative over and over and over again from different sources and different people. You know, we've spoke about certain organizations on these interviews before. We've spoken about Simon Goldberg. We've spoken about White Rabbit. We've spoken about Empower the People. And we've spoken about the narrative that these guys are spinning. But there's another person in the frame here that we want to talk about today, which is a guy called Dan Needle. And I want to dig into what he's been doing as far as this kind of ecosystem that's been created, shall we call it. You know, Matrix Freedom Review, Simon Goldberg, Dan Needle seems to be very much a part of this ecosystem as well. So I want to talk about that because he's relied heavily on this narrative that's out there. The narrative from Simon, the narrative from Matrix Freedom Reviews, rather than on what I would consider to be professional, you know, journalistic investigation. So let me ask you this. Has Dan Needle ever interviewed you directly to get some context?
No, you see that, you know, in journalism, it appears that you don't actually want to know the truth at all. You just want the story, right? So the last thing you're probably going to do is go and interview the target, because they might have things to say that don't fit the predetermined narrative that you want to push out there, right? Because it appears to me, and I've had a lot of experience, I've been sadly on the wrong end of media for 16 years, right? Television, radio, newspapers, internet, right? I've seen it all, right? Now, there's only been one occasion where a journalist actually came to me before they ran a story. And what I did with him was I said, okay, fine, you want to run a story? And I'm glad that you've come to me, because they are supposed to come to you, by the way. They are supposed to give you it's called the right of reply, right? So they are supposed to come to you and say, I'm planning on writing this particular article, story, blog, whatever, and I want your comments on it before I do. That's what they're supposed to do, because there is actually allegedly some ethics in journalism, right? And they belong to a sort of quasi-professional body. It's bullshit, but they roll it out. Oh yeah, we belong to the whatever it's called, some kind of regulatory body, right, for journalism, right?
Kind of like the Better Business Bureau of the journalist.
I don't think there's anything of any substance going on with it, because if there were, there wouldn't be so many libel lawsuits in the courts. where victims of bad journalism are suing people for damages. But this particular journalist did come to me, and he sent me what he was planning to write, which I thought was refreshing, right? So I went straight back to it. I challenged him because it was factual nonsense, right? There was no fact in what he was going to write. It was all regurgitated nonsense that he'd read on the internet, right? Because that appears to be about the level of journalism these days. Is rather than doing proper investigative journalistic, proper investigation, what these guys do is they just have 10 minutes on Google or on the internet. What can they find? Oh, and just regurgitate the same content and rewrite it and rephrase it in their own language. And then that's what they do, right? And that's what this guy done, right? So he came to me, long story short, I pushed it back and I said, if you publish this, now that you've given me an opportunity to push back against what you are saying, I will sue you for libel. And malicious, your intent is malicious because your article is only designed for one outcome, and that is to destroy my reputation even further than it's already been destroyed. And I said, I'll tell you what we'll do. We will do a recorded video of you asking me all the questions that you put in this document here, and I will give you the answers. And I want that recorded video. So if you then go and publish the article, then I've got proof that I gave you all the facts, not the perception, the facts before you publish any article. And he actually agreed to do the video with me.
Oh, wow.
Did the video,
yeah,
which was quite. I think he thought he was going to trip me up, right? And he thought, oh, this is an opportunity. I'm going to get Ian to admit all this, that, and the other, so that he can use that in his article
on video.
Well, it backfired on it.
Okay.
Because I'm not bad at debate, especially when the debate is about me, right? I think I know what's going on with my history and my, what's been happening in my life. If somebody wants to debate me about my stuff, I don't think there's anybody on the planet more qualified than I am about what's happening in my life. Yeah. So he didn't win that debate, and the video was recorded, and he never published the article. Strangely enough.
Strange that.
But, strange that, yeah. But Dan Needle, who, and I want to say this, right, because when Dan, I'm sure he will watch this at some stage, right? Dan Needle was a partner of a law firm called Clifford Chance, one of the world's biggest law firms, by the way. Magic Circle law firm, one of the 6 elite law firms in the United Kingdom. You don't go and work at Clifford Chance unless you're one of the chosen lawyers. You have to be in the inner circle. You probably had to go to the right school. You have to be sponsored by the right people. You would have to have the right qualifications. And you're now entering into the world of the elites. Okay. Now, what Dan Needle probably doesn't realize, because I'm sure he's done no research, is that my firm used to employ Clifford Chance as corporate lawyers. So in the period of time that Dan Needle was a partner of Clifford Chance, he actually worked for me.
That's very telling.
Interesting.
Very telling.
And you see, you don't get to employ Magic Circle law firms. They won't take you on unless your firm is actually quite professional.
I can imagine.
Because they don't want to have a client list of rogues and vagabonds on their client list, do they?
No.
So
you were selected. It's exactly the same as the situation that you were in. You had a waiting list. You were selective in terms of who you worked with. Why? Because you could be. I guess same with them. They would be very selective in terms of who they would also work with because of their standing and station within that world, I guess.
I had DLA Piper, which is another very prominent law firm, and I had Rosenblatt Law, and I had Clifford Chance, 3 of the biggest law firms in the UK working for my firm as corporate lawyers, because that's what you have when you run a big financial services firm, right? And I don't think Dan Needle has realised that.
Cottoned on to that one. No.
He sees me in a very different light because he's done no research. If he has, what he appears to have done, as far as I can see, is that he's just Googled, he's found all these negative websites and blogs and videos that Simon Goldberg and others have produced, and without doing any further investigation into whether these things are actually true, he's then triangulated that with the FCA, who have had a vendetta against me since I blew the whistle in 2008, 2009. And he's added 2 and 2 together, and he's ended up with 43.
Okay. So there's been this narrative that's primarily been built on internet material, is what we're saying, rather than digging deep and looking at where's the primary source of the information. There's been talk and there's been phrases and language like scam and pseudo-legal, conspiracy theory, fraudster. There's all sorts of different narrative that's been used, but it sounds to me like at no point in time has he even directly been in contact with you about this to get your side of the story. So there's never been any real due diligence, no forensic due diligence done in this regard. It would seem to me like all he's done is mirror what he's found on the internet and these online sources that are out there. So
I'd go further than that, Andy. I've had a good look at what he writes about, right? What he does, and I think I've figured out what he's doing, right? He looks around on the internet for targets that have got a bit of heat on the internet. And then what he does, because he's got a huge social media following, which is interesting in itself, and I'd like to come back to that, right? He then regurgitates what other people are saying about a particular target. And because he's got a huge social media following, the people that follow him somehow, for some strange, bizarre reason, start to believe that what he's saying must be true because it's Dan Needle that's saying it, right?
Yeah. Okay. Now, in addition to Dan and what he's been doing, I know that part of this regurgitation, shall we say, has also been what's happened with the FCA. Because you can imagine that if people are going to regurgitate information and they're going to look for heat, that's a hotspot, isn't it?
Yeah,
clearly.
Yeah.
So let's just talk about that for anybody that hasn't seen any more context or heard about Order 34. You know, because I want to look at this from a fact versus perception angle as well. You know, is it legal fact? Is it just a weapon that's being used for what's perceived to be true that's out there? So that's a central pillar, I feel, of criticism right now, is this Order 34. And yet, when you break it down and you look at that, the litigation document outlines 3, from what I can see, structural challenges, jurisdictional challenges that are currently under appeal as well. Do you want to just go through what Order 34 is and what are these challenges that you've put out surrounding the structure of the actual order itself?
Well, you see that, and if you know, sadly, I've had to research the playbooks that the cabal use, right? So when you've got someone like me who's a bit dangerous, right? He knows a bit too much. He might actually start revealing the pathway out of the matrix, right? He might actually be able to do that, right? It's just in the same way as you might get someone who develops free energy or a cure for cancer. or pure water from sewage or something, or anything like that, right? Now, you got someone like that who's got a few skills, right? He's got a bit of talent, he's got a little bit of history, he's actually got the ability to put a few things together that might challenge the cabal's control agenda, which is, what I'm doing ultimately, by revealing the truth about how the matrix works and how you get out of it, lawfully get out of it. And suddenly you've got a bit of a target on your back, haven't you?
Yeah.
And not only are you a whistleblower, because that's bad enough for the cabal, because they've got some really inconvenient things that they're trying to cover up. Just have a look at the Hillsborough football disaster and you see what I'm talking about. That was covered up 25 years. How about the post office scandal? Yeah, that was covered up about 10 or 15 years, right? Yeah. So, what I blew the whistle on wasn't just HBOS. It's 90 billion of bank fraud. 90 billion pounds. Yeah. It wasn't just HBOS had a bit of a problem in their Reading branch. No. That's the story they want you to believe. No, this is a 90 billion pound systemic fraud of the top 6 banks, covered up by the financial regulators, the very people that are supposed to be there as the watchdogs of the city, are the ones covering it up, right? So just to put it into context, it wasn't just because I was blowing the whistle on HBOS. No. I was blowing the whistle on banks in general.
And the regulators.
And I wasn't just blowing the whistle about one bank over one particular issue. My whistle blowing went into the high courts. I did something called a judicial review in 2017. 7-8 years later, I got a judicial review, which is a very serious high court review of the conduct of the regulator.
Yeah.
What happened to it? It got buried. They ran me around for 2 years. It ended up in 3 different court venues, and then it was scrubbed from the record. Now, that is just before their first attempt to jail me for what's known as the breach or a breach of the general prohibition.
Right.
So let me explain what it is. If you are operating an organization or you individually are operating something that requires a regulatory license, so fund management, for example, if you are going to manage other people's money in a collective investment way, and you do not have a fund manager's license from them, from the FCA, that is known as a breach of the general prohibition.
Okay.
And it's very serious.
I would think you would know about that with your financial background and the plethora of licenses that you did have to have.
Yeah, I 100% understand what that's all about.
Yeah.
And because I was trying to get back into running financial services ventures with licensing, and I did 7 applications to the regulator, the FCA, FSA, and each one of them was run out of time. So they couldn't reject them because there was no grounds to reject them, right? But they couldn't accept them either, because if they accepted them, that would undermine their destruction of my big financial services organization that was destroyed in 2010, right?
Yeah.
So they couldn't accept the applications for regulatory licensing, but they couldn't reject them either because there were no grounds to reject.
No grounds to reject.
No grounds. If they accepted
between a rock and a hard place on that one, then aren't they? I get that. So out of time is probably the only option that they had.
So what they do is they just run you in the long grass, right? Literally. And I did 7 of those over a 7-year period. Each one of them went on more than a year. And it's not just a bit of, you don't just send an email to the regulator saying, hey, can I have a license? No, it's like a telephone book that you have to fill in of all the details on what it is you want to do, how you're going to do it all, and what your qualifications are to do it, right?
Okay. So just for context on that alone, just for some context on that side of things as well, so that people understand what that means. If you go back to the time period where you were applying for licenses and you were granted licenses, I'm assuming that was same process, go through the huge questionnaire, fill it all in, send it off. Typically, how long would it take for you to get a response and actually be licensed?
Before the whistleblowing event and before the destruction of Integrity, my firm Integrity, by the way, my firm was called Integrity because I have integrity, by the way, right? So to get a permission would take no more than a month before the whistleblower. Right. Regulatory permissions never took more than a month. And my firm had a whole list of them, literally, for all different things, functions. It's called functions of regulation, right? And we had a whole list of them because it was a professional firm, right? Now, then you get into the post-2010 period, and I just want to get a license to do some of the things I used to do before, and they run them in the long grass for seven of them in a row over a 7-year period until they run out of time. And then you can't continue with them because they've run out of time and they make up excuses. They ask you the same question like over and over and over and over and over again. You keep answering the question, and then they wait a month, and then they come back to you and ask you the same question again. And then they say, well, you never answered the questions in the right way, so that your application ran out of time.
Yeah.
That's what they do, right?
There's a pattern here, for sure. We can see that forming already. And I hope people that are watching this can see a bit more context, a bit more colour, a bit more landscape in terms of what's going on.
Just to make it even more colourful, I even went out and tried to buy a firm that had regulatory permissions.
Okay.
And I did a deal with an investment management firm when I still had some funds available. And I agreed to purchase a firm with all the regulatory permissions.
With the credentials, yeah.
And the FCA vetoed that. As soon as they knew that I was going to buy this firm that had the regulatory permissions that I was seeking, they squashed it straight away. Yeah, I tried that. Now you move into 2017. The judicial review is come and gone. It's been railroaded. It's been scrubbed from the record. You will not find it in any. If you look in Bailey is all the court cases, by the way. It's a database called Bailey. You will not find my judicial review against the regulator anywhere to be seen on the public record. It's scrubbed from history, right?
Okay.
And then the FCA go after one of my joint venture partners, Stargate Capital Management. Now, I had developed a whole range of algorithmic trading systems for trading pension fund assets and for trading in the currency markets. And I won't go into all the detail, but it was one of the algorithms took me 10 years to build it.
Wow.
It's a 10-year project, right? And I had a team of developers, and I did all the architecture, and we built algorithmic trading systems that made consistent profit in a very challenging market called the FX markets. And I built something called CVAR volatility, which is a model that basically manages ETFs, exchange traded funds, using volatility triggers to rebalance portfolios. It was groundbreaking stuff. I based it on a Nobel Prize winning strategy, right? And I was supported by a fund management firm called Stargate Capital Management, who knew of my track record and wanted to work with me. And I built a platform where I ran all the IT side and all the algorithmic side, and the fund manager ran the fund management permissions, right? So I found a way around the FSA, FCA's vendetta against me.
You're not managing the funds. They were managing the funds. You just provided the software to perform a certain function, shall we say.
The reality of it is that everything that was important about that venture was run by me. But in regulatory land, the algorithmic trading systems, right, they are controlled by the fund manager.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put this into an example where people might understand what I'm talking about. If you've got a doctor who can turn off a life support machine,
yeah,
the doctor is licensed to be able to do that or not. Yeah, nobody else can turn that machine on and off, right?
Yeah.
In the context of fund management, the fund manager, Stargate Capital Management, had the ability to turn on and off the algorithmic trading systems.
Yeah.
So they have the ultimate control of whether those algorithmic systems are trading the markets or not.
Yeah.
And that is what the regulatory permission is for. It's for the control of the management function, right?
Yeah.
I built the algorithms. There's 125 FX algorithms and a CVAR volatility model, which, by the way, there's a firm called Scalable Capital who copied my model, who now have £6 billion under management.
Wow. Okay. Using a copy
the same
yeah.
model that I built that took me nearly 10 years to build, right? With a team of developers, right? So what did the FCA do? They went after Stargate and speculated that I may have been managing the investment funds. Now, Stargate knew I wasn't. The FCA knew I wasn't, because they all knew that the algorithmic systems were managing the investment funds, right? Just to put it into context, it was a pension transfer model, and we had 100,000 pension holders, I should say, that were in progress of transferring their pensions into my model.
Okay.
50 million a month of pension transfers was coming in.
Wow. Okay.
Right? Just to put it into context, it was a very big venture. It was called the pension solution. So the FCA went to Stargate, and they went after Stargate, and the owner of Stargate, Paresh Shah, he called me one day and he said, I've just had a call from the FCA. They want to interview me. And I said, well, that's interesting. I expect it's because you're working with me, Paresh, because they don't like me very much. So he went to the interview, and exactly what I predicted. They basically told him in a meeting in Canary Wharf that if he carried on working with me, they'd destroy him and his firm. Yeah. But because he was really keen on what we were doing, he could see the merits of it, he wanted to carry on. So he did carry on. He didn't heed the warning of the FCA, right? Then what happens is that they then start to investigate his firm. Now, you do not want to be investigated by the FCA. I can guarantee that. It's worse than an HMRC investigation.
Okay.
They are going to bog you down like you've never imagined in your life what they can do to you, right? They're going to crawl under every single rock. They're going to look in every cupboard. They're going to look everywhere in all aspects of your life, right? And then what happened was I got an invitation to go to their head office in Canary Wharf, which I'd been there many times before. I actually presented to them years before because they asked me to present a model which was how to solve the pension deficit for corporate pensions, which is a model I built as well, which was adopted by my business partners in the US, where $80 million was raised for it through a venture capital firm called Austin Ventures in Austin, Texas.
Okay.
And I had figured out how to solve the pension deficit problem for occupational pensions, right? So this is company pension schemes with a big deficit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had figured out how to do it. It's one of the many solutions that I'd come up with years before. And it was adopted in the US. And the FSA, as it was then, asked me to come in and do a presentation to their staff. This is after they destroyed my reputation. They didn't realize who I was until I got there.
Okay.
And the solution was all to do with mortality and longevity, right? Because I figured out an arbitrage on it's called longevity mortality. It's a bit deep, it's a bit technical. But basically, I'd figured out how to use life insurance from the US to solve the pension deficit problem for European pension schemes, right?
Okay.
And it's all based on using life insurance arbitrages and mixing together financial models. It's an interview for a different day, right?
Yeah.
But basically, the FSA, as it was back then, asked me to come and present to them and write what they called a thematic review of this particular model that I'd been working on. And then they realised who I was.
And what happened?
It never went any further.
Okay.
All right.
Funny that.
So I'd been to this head office before, right? And they put. So when I went back again under the Stargate investigation, they interviewed me with 6 of them in the room, heads of department, with their lawyers in the room on what's called a compelled interview. That's a formal, official interview on recording. It's like you're a criminal, right?
Yeah.
And I got there, and they invited me there because they said they had some questions for me. And I wrote back to them and said, can you tell me what your questions are? And I'll answer them. No. They said, you need to come in and we'll have a chat, right? When I got there, and I walked in the room, and there's literally 6 heavyweights on the other side of the table, heads of department, heads of their legal department sitting there. I said, I wasn't expecting it to be this formal. And they said, well, it's going to be a compelled interview, Ian, didn't you know? And I said, you never told me it was going to be a compelled interview. Do you want to have a lawyer? They said to me. I said, no, I don't need a lawyer. What do I need a lawyer for, right? So then they said, well, it's going to go on a while, so have you cleared your schedule? And I said, well, how long is it going to go on for? And they said, it's going to go on a minimum of 4 hours.
Okay.
And I said, what on earth are you going to be asking me for 4 hours?
4 hours,
in relation to my algorithmic systems that I've built, that Stargate Capital Management is licensing from my firm, UK Innovative TI. That's all I've got with Stargate is a software license.
Yeah.
How is it going to take you 4 hours to interview me on that? Do you know what they did? They went back for 25 years and asked me about every single company that I'd ever formed, what I did, all the different relationships I'd have with all different people, going back for 25 years prior to that day.
Right.
They had a dossier, literally like 3 phone books thick, of research that they claimed that they'd done, and they listed out all of these questions that they went through. None of them were anything to do with my algorithmic trading systems and Stargate. They were trying to trip me up on tape. They were trying to get me to admit that I had made some mistakes somewhere so that they could hang me out to dry and get it on a tape on a compelled interview.
Right.
Well, guess what? They never got anything from me that could incriminate me, because I've never done anything that would incriminate me.
No.
That was 4 hours it went on for.
Okay. So talk to me a little bit about this Order 34 then, because this is obviously, like I said, this is a hot spot that people like Dan Needle are certainly homing in on. There are some fundamental flaws with this, aren't there, that we want to address?
Yeah. Well, I mean, in 2018, they tried to convict me of running the investment funds of Stargate without a license, right? And that backfired on them because I found a way to get into the high courts. It's a story for a different day. It's a long story. I fought them in the high courts, the FCA and their lawyers, just me on my own, and I beat them in the upper tribunal. That's the High Court in the Strand in London, right? And it's UK Innovative TI versus the FCA. It's a landmark case. It's never been done before. I'm not saying it because I want to big my ego up. It's just that I was very determined for them not to beat me. But the outcome was they destroyed Stargate Capital Management. They destroyed the solution. And they almost, Paresh Shah almost took his life. I actually had to save him from suicide because his whole world had been destroyed by the regulator because they were coming after me, right? That's 2018, right? Now, you then wind the clock forward to 2021, and I've got there's a firm called Senj, S-E-N-J Limited, which is running out of the Seychelles. And my friend Terry Franks, who, by the way, was the compliance officer for Morgan Stanley Bank. So he's got a very, very deep compliance pedigree. Terry Franks, right? I'd known Terry for years, right? And Terry was providing an administration service in the very, very early days of Matrix Freedom. It was called Mortgage Free in the very, very early days, right?
Okay.
Terry's firm ran the administration function for the membership that was mortgage free that then became Matrix Freedom. I wasn't running the administration. Terry Franks's firm, Senj Limited, was running the administrative services, right? So there's a theme all the way through this, Andy, in that I haven't run any administration. I haven't provided any services to any of the members. I do webinars, I do technical, I do some consultancy, but nobody pays me, no members pay me, there's no trust fund that's been set up in this myth that came later that somehow I'm running a trust fund for the benefit of the members. No, Ian Clifford runs webinars, puts together technical papers and solutions, and doesn't provide any individual services to any individual member. Okay, just put that out there, right? Because it's very substantially important. Terence Frank's firm, Senj, was a member of Matrix Freedom in the early days, and he provided the administration services to those people that took up the Strax Capital Legal, which is a regulated firm, indemnity claims against the land registry, which was called Mortgage Free. Yeah. So you had Strax Capital Legal, that is a regulated claims management company, sending in indemnity claims to the land registry, and you've got Senj Limited, which is a Seychelles administration company run by Terence Franks, providing the administration support. Ian Clifford isn't providing any administration, isn't providing any claims management service, right?
No.
But in 2021, the FCA wrote to Senj Limited with allegations and speculations that Senj Limited may be providing a claims management service.
Okay.
In the UK. Now, Terry Franks is the last person you're going to write to about UK regulatory compliance.
Yeah.
Because he ran the compliance for Morgan Stanley.
Yeah.
Right? So Terry called me and said, I've just had this letter in from the FCA. What do you want me to do about it? I said, I'll tell you what, why don't you and I together write a response? We'll put them back in their box, right?
Yeah.
Which we did. And I actually wrote a 125-page report for Terry on why what Terry was doing was not regulated activity.
Okay.
Terry didn't need it because he already knew that, right?
Well, yeah, of course, just from his background.
And Terry responded to the FCA with all the reasons why what his firm in the Seychelles was doing was not regulated claims management activity. Now you wind the clock forward to 2023. And this is June of 2023 when I get arrested by 13 police at my door. Yeah. And they've got a warrant for my arrest. And allegedly, me and organisations which weren't even named on the warrant may have been providing financial services without a licence.
Okay, again.
May have been, right?
Yeah.
So I get taken into the police investigation centre in Portsmouth, and who's waiting for me? The FCA. And I get put into a cell, and I get I may end up in a 13-hour interview with the FCA.
Right.
And all the way through the interview, I keep asking the two interviewers who are employed by the FCA, high-level, forensic, from the crime department of the FCA.
Okay.
Right? And I kept asking them, when are you guys going to ask me about claims management, debt counselling, or issuing financial promotions, which is investment adverts, by the way, without a license? Because that's what it says you've arrested me for. So when are you going to ask me some questions about those three things?
And what was their response to that?
Their response was, Mr. Stamp, you don't get to ask us the questions. We get to ask you.
Okay. And let me guess, was this a similar fiasco to when you were under a compelled interview? As in, let's just dig up everything and anything that we possibly can to try and get you to trip up.
I have had three compelled interviews since 2010. Andy, the first one, and I won't go on very long, but I'll just show you how ridiculous it is, right? So in the destruction of my financial services firm, there was another compelled interview. It was in 2009, right? Just before my firm was destroyed by the regulator. And the four of them came to my firm. They stayed for 3 days and they tore every single shred of files and everything that we had. They tore it all apart, trying to find some weaknesses in my compliance, right? Couldn't find anything at all, right? Because we had a very, very tight compliance ship, right? Compliance, by the way, is the regulatory principles, the rule book, the governance book, and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
Now, they got me in a compelled interview, and they were interviewing me about some marketing literature that we used to use back in 2009, right? And my literature, this just shows you how ridiculous these things are, right? My literature was in color. This is back in the day when you had printed brochures, right?
Yeah.
So we had color brochures. And in some of the pages, charts and graphs in color, right? Back in the day when you used to have printed material. I'm going back a few years ago, right?
Yeah.
And this guy had printed off one of my brochures. It was in black and white.
Okay.
And halfway through the compelled interview, he pushed it across the table to me and he said, can you tell me on that chart, is it obvious to the reader what that chart actually means to them? Because it's not in color.
Right.
And you can't see the different lines, the different colored lines, because this is now printed in black and white.
Okay.
And I thought, that's because it's meant to be printed in color.
In color.
All of our brochures were printed in color, right?
Yeah.
And he said, but this brochure's been printed in black and white, and I can't tell the difference between the different lines of the chart because they're not in color. And isn't that very misleading, Mr. Stamp? And I say, well, it isn't misleading to me because I print it in color.
Yeah. It's meant to be in color. It's formatted for color. The graph is formatted for color. Yeah.
We could do an interview on how ridiculous their interviews are, Andy. Literally, we could do a whole interview in what I've endured in 3 compelled interviews with these clowns, what they present in court cases, how they rig things, how they conceal things, how they blackmail people, how they bribe people, how they threaten people to get their way, right? And I don't care what I say, because it's 100% the truth. If you're watching this interview, the FCA, you know what I'm talking about is true, right? So Order 34, 2023 is no different from everything I've experienced since 2010, when I blew 2009, when I blew the whistle, right? Okay, so in order to take on a prosecution as the FCA, who have got a criminal department,
yes,
which is a big part of what they do in their regulatory enforcement, right?
Yeah.
Now let's just go through this, right? If you are going to prosecute Ian Clifford for allegedly breaching the general prohibition, who may have breached the general prohibition, with no evidence to back it up at all, by the way, and you are going to advance a case at Southwark Crown Court as the FCA, and you're going to get an order from the Southwark Crown Court that is what's known as a constraint order, which enables you to constrain Ian Clifford's life and freeze all of his bank accounts and get him to report to you at the FCA every day to ask permission on what he can do that day and what he can't do that day, and whether he can spend any of his own funds or not, which is the order that they got from Southwark Crown Court. If you're going to get that order, you need to be operating as a proper standing as a prosecutor for the FCA. You can't hire the guy down the road to come and prosecute the case for you, right?
No, not for something that serious, no.
You can't hire even a barrister or a lawyer to do it for you.
Okay.
Because in the Financial Services and Markets Act, it says that the FCA, if they're going to prosecute, have to be the prosecutor.
Okay. So let's talk about the prosecutor then.
Well, so the case starts in 2023 and I'm arrested and then I'm constrained and then I go into a different jurisdiction where the order has no legal standing. I went to Indonesia and then I came to North Cyprus, and I've talked about all the reasons why many times before, right? Now, in 2025, having tried to push back against the order repeatedly and also doing a judicial review, another judicial review about Order 23, 2024, right? I then realised that the whole thing was going to be railroaded. Now, they're talking about a sentencing hearing in July of 2025, and in May of 2025, I began to realise, having served endless numbers of notices on the Southwark Crown Court and the FCA to prove that they had a case, and they just ignored me, right? Having challenged them that they had no evidence of any regulated activities being provided, having submitted 500 witness statements from members of Metrics Freedom that confirmed that no regulated services have ever been provided, I began to realise that this is going to be railroaded. It doesn't matter what I do or what I say, they're going to get their way here. And what are they going to try and do is they're going to try and get a conviction, an incarceration for 12 months, if not longer, so that they can lock me up in solitary confinement. And then they will extend it because they will pretend that they are still investigating whether there are regulated services being provided or not.
Right. So that 12-month sentence would have been an open-ended sentence, basically, wouldn't it?
Would have been open-ended, yeah. It would have gone on for years and years. And I'm 60, right? So they'd probably kill me. I'll probably never come out again, right? So I knew that was their plan. It was obvious that was their plan from the beginning, right? So I started looking at what could I challenge. And in the art of legal warfare, the first thing you do is challenge the standing of your opponent. So I started looking into whether Alistair Mackenzie, who allegedly was the FCA's prosecutor, was actually a real prosecutor. What is his standing as a prosecutor for the FCA? But strangely enough, I couldn't find him anywhere. All right. So if you've got a high,
we're not just talking about a here's this guy, but he isn't qualified. Are you saying you couldn't find the guy?
The guy doesn't exist.
So we've not just got somebody who doesn't have the right qualifications and standing to prosecute. We've got a prosecutor that literally is a figment of the FCA's imagination.
What you've got is exactly what Simon Goldberg does, is invents characters.
Okay.
and sends witness statements in from characters and invent. What the FCA have done is invented a prosecutor.
Okay.
So if there is no lawfully appointed prosecutor by the FCA, even if you don't understand the law, how can there be a case with any merit?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can't prosecute without a prosecutor, can you?
No.
Very
So
simple.
I challenged Southwark Crown Court. I challenged the FCA to prove that Alistair Mackenzie was real.
Yeah.
I looked exhaustively. I did a huge amount of forensic research and could not find Alistair Mackenzie anywhere as a public servant working for the FCA.
Okay.
All right. Now, if there's no prosecutor, there's no case.
No, okay.
It's as simple as that, right?
No. So that's fundamental flaw number one.
And I challenged it before the sentence was handed down, right?
Yeah.
Southwark Crown Court ignored it. It didn't fit their narrative, didn't fit their agenda, and the FCA ignored it, right? So then what happens is the sentence is handed down. It's full of nonsense. I could run a coach and horses through it, which I did. I did critique it and send out a document on it. It's total fabrication, most of the things that they talk about in the sentencing, of which you can find it all over the internet now. Obviously, you search Ian Clifford on the internet. The first thing that comes up is
will be the FCA sentencing.
Ian Clifford sentenced to 12 months custodial sentence. People don't look any further than that. Oh, he must be a fraud. Oh, look, he's been sentenced to jail.
Yeah, yeah. Which is what people are finding, no doubt. What people see, like I said, it's at the top of Google. How can it not be?
And if you're Dan Needle and you have been employed, in my opinion, without any evidence to back it up, I have to say, but in my opinion, Dan Needle has been employed by the likes of the FCA to cover these types of things up. What are you going to do? You're going to focus your huge social media army against that, aren't you? Against that sentence.
Yeah.
And you're going to maximize your leverage that you can use that sentence against Ian Clifford, because it's not you that's saying that he's been sentenced to 12 months. No. It's Southwark Crown Court and it's the FCA. And who wouldn't believe them, right?
So what are the challenges that have been put through as far as this case? Because obviously the sentence has been served now. That's been and gone. You said you could run a coach and horses through it. Talk to me a little bit of. So we've got no prosecutor. That's clearly the first thing. Yeah. What else is there?
Well, the second thing is the FCA claim in 2023 in June. They went to the offices, not my offices, offices that members of the administration team were using in Chesington that weren't working for me. They were working for other companies, right? They went to those offices with, I think, 20 police officers, and they raided the offices.
Right.
And they collected all of the boxes of files, and they collected 30 plus computers from those offices and took them all away. Okay. Right? Now, this forms the nature and substance of the FCA's investigation. So what the FCA are actually investigating are computers that don't belong to me. No. Are files that don't belong to me. Right. The files that they are investigating belong to Strax Capital Legal and Lighthouse Financial, two FCA authorised firms that used to provide various services to administration companies like Senge Limited that weren't mine. Okay. So, along the way, I kept challenging the FCA because they wrote to me at one point in early 2025 and said that they had finished a lot of the investigation into my files and they wanted to return them. And I went back to them and said, well, the first thing is that these are not my files.
No.
The second thing is you can't return them to me because I was in North Cyprus then. You can't return them to me because they don't belong to me. And by the way, I'm in North Cyprus. You need to return them to the owners, which is Strax Capital Legal and Lighthouse Financial.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why do you want to return them to me? I've already told you they're not mine.
They're not mine. Yeah.
Now, every 6 months, the FCA have got to do their investigation report to Southwark Crown Court, right? Which they've been doing since 2023. So there's been 2 in 2023, 2 in 2024, and there's been 2 in 2025.
Okay.
And every time they write this report, which is like, 50 pages long, they talk about these files and what they're doing to forensically analyze everything in these files.
Okay.
But the files don't belong to me. So I challenge them to prove that if they're investigating these files, that these files actually belong to me, having told them repeatedly they don't belong to me. That is their investigation, by the way, into files that don't belong to me.
Right. So just for the audience sake, I think what people need to understand here is that this investigation that's going on with the FCA has nothing to do with Order 34 at all.
No.
I just want people to understand the separation here, because a sentence has been passed down on Order 34, but the FCA investigation is still ongoing. So what exactly is Order 34? What was that? Because you touched on it, but then we kind of drifted over onto.
So Order 34 is a constraint order. Anyone in the UK could have a constraint order issued against them, by the way.
Yeah.
Anyone. I don't care who you are, you could have a constraint order.
Yeah.
Some authority department of the government can pretend that they're investigating you for some reason or another. Maybe you support the wrong football team. Who knows what the reason is, right?
Yeah.
Literally. And then they can constrain you through an order from Southwark Crown Court. What I mean by constraint is you're not permitted to use your bank accounts. That's the main constraint. You're not permitted to run a business. You're not permitted to do anything without their permission. That is a constraint order.
Okay.
So you've basically immobilized the car. If you're thinking like a car, you can put an immobilizer on it. Now you can't drive the car, right?
Gotcha.
Only if the immobilizer is lifted can you actually travel around, if it was a car, right? But the constraint order only applies in the United Kingdom, which is why I went to Indonesia.
Yeah.
So that I could carry on with my life.
Yep.
Why I came to North Cyprus, so that I could carry on with my life and carry on working on solving the problems for our members.
Yep.
Right?
I wanted clarity there for people, just so they understand that
contrary to
the
popular
sentence is
belief,
this is not an FCA sentence. The FCA is still an ongoing quote unquote investigation and has been for a number of years. They've had these files, which don't even belong to you, that they've been apparently scrutinizing, and still have not come up with any evidence of unregulated activity.
of regulated activity.
Sorry, regulated activity. Yeah.
So what the FCA did is entrapment by design, because they already knew that what I do is not regulated activity. Presenting webinars is not regulated activity. Writing research reports is not regulated activity. Assisting people as a consultant internally on their administration is not a regulated activity. They already know that. They didn't need to investigate anything to already know that. The reason why they did the investigation was it gave them the excuse to get Order 34, a constraint order, so knowing that I would breach it, because it's impossible to live without breaching it. If you breach the order, the constraint order, then they can put you in jail, which is exactly what they tried to do, as I've mentioned on a number of times before, right? So the investigation is fake. The prosecutor is fake. And now you've got something else, which is service. So if you understand the law, right, and remember scenes from movies when they say you've been served.
Yeah.
You can't be served unless there is a registered address to be served on. So you can't just say, oh, we're going to prosecute you, and by the way, the hearing was last week and you were sentenced to 20 years in jail. You have to be served before the hearing, right?
Yeah.
Before any hearing, right? And they can't just send a letter into outer space and say you've been served. They have to serve on a registered address. It's a big pillar of the of the procedures of the legal system, right?
Yeah.
No registered address exists for Ian Clifford. And I told them this. I kept on telling them that even though they're sending emails to an email account, the email account doesn't belong to me. I often don't read it. And it is not a registered address for service. And I warned them of this with notices before the sentence was handed down.
And that was ignored as well.
And they ignored that as well.
Okay.
So you see, they haven't got a prosecutor. They haven't got any evidence of regulated services. And they never served anything on a registered address.
No.
Now, if anybody out there who's in their first year of law school wants to have a look into that, you'll quickly realize that that case is a legal nullity, meaning it does not exist.
Yeah.
Which is why it's in the Court of Appeal. And it's why the Court of Appeal rejected it originally, because they rejected it on the grounds that, oh no, Ian, you need a lawyer to present this case to the Court of Appeal.
Okay.
No, I don't, because I can represent myself. It's called pro se.
Yeah.
Litigant in person. So
yeah.
I've resubmitted it all at the beginning of January, having had it rejected in December, having put the FCA on formal notice to deliver to me 3 things: the prosecutor evidence, the evidence of regulated activity, and the evidence of service. And I've done it in line with case precedent that they have to do it. If they don't do it, then they are admitting, with case precedent to back it up, that they have no case. And the case has to be struck out. And guess what? It's gone completely silent from the FCA.
Mm.
It's gone completely silent from the Court of Appeal.
I bet it has.
We're now on the 24th, 25th of February. 25th of February.
Yeah.
So at least 6 weeks has gone by since I resubmitted the case.
And you've heard nothing?
Nothing from either party, from the Court of Appeal or from the FCA.
Okay. Silence is deafening sometimes, isn't it?
You'd think with a high-profile case like this that they might have replied by now if they actually thought they had some merit behind what they were doing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I hope that gives people some context in terms of history, in terms of where you're at now, what you've endured, what you've sacrificed, what you've been through. Like you said, you're a human like me, like anybody else. You have feelings, you have thoughts, you have good days, bad days, ups and downs like we all do. And yet this narrative still persists on the internet.
Well, what happens, of course, is that the darkness, which is why the Equalizer project is a war against the darkness, right?
Yeah.
So the darkness here is that you've got a whistleblower, me, who won awards, who only ever tried to do, as still does today, tries to help people to get out of the problems and difficulties that they're in, who's made lots of mistakes, like we all have, who's honestly and openly admitted to making mistakes along the way. I'm a human being, I do make mistakes, and I admit to them, right? I've only ever had one thing in my mind and one thing in my heart, and that is the intention to help people to get to a better place. And I've had that intention ever since I can remember. Yeah. And I quite frankly don't care if people don't believe me when I say that, because I know it's the truth. And many people that are in our membership who believe in me and give me glowing testimonials of my intention know it as well. So if you're one of those who watches this and thinks, yeah, he just talks a great game, doesn't he? He's like full of shit, this guy, yeah? You don't know anything about me.
No. But for those who do feel that way, there are some verified outcomes here that we can talk about versus this scam label that people are peddling all over the internet, the Dan Needles and the Simon Goldbergs of this world. Let's talk a little bit about that, because they're claiming that this is all a fraud, it's a scam, it doesn't work, you don't know what you're doing, you're an idiot, it's all word soup. There's so many different phrases that are being bandied around, but let's talk a little bit about some fact as well, some verified outcomes here, because there are now, I believe, in excess of $600 million worth of verified IRS recoupments that are sitting there on the IRS wages and tax transcript. So my thought process behind this is, if IRS systems, not ours, if IRS systems have processed those filings, if treasury checks have been issued, and in addition to that, there is a further 600 million sitting on the transcript, is it even intellectually honest for somebody to dismiss all of that and just go with the narrative that's on the internet? Shouldn't there be some criticism here? You know, shouldn't there be some digging into the actual technical protocols behind this, the Clifford Protocol, the Infinite Money Protocol? Shouldn't there be somebody, if they're going to criticize those protocols, shouldn't that be based on a true independent forensic audit of the protocols themselves, rather than just assuming that what's on Google is the truth and the narrative that we should accept?
Yeah. Well, there's an old saying, Andy, which is you should never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Yeah.
Right? Now, the truth is, and the reality is, and the facts are, that I had thousands of wealth management clients back in the day, and accountants and lawyers referred me perpetually to their clients. They wouldn't have done that if I had bad intention, or I was an idiot, right? Or I was full of word soup, right? So that's one thing, right? Then I've developed a whole range of solutions to fairly complex problems and built algorithmic trading systems, solved the pension deficit, solved the home income plan, solved so many things that nobody knows about. They don't understand what those things are, or they're not reported on in the internet searches they're doing. Won awards for innovation and design. Right? And then I've got Ecclesia Law. So Ecclesia Law Institute, where I've written about 50 research papers that aren't word soup, I can assure you. No. I can assure you that they're not word soup. They're quite logical. They're quite well written, even if I say so myself. Right? And lots of people have said that they think that they're very good and they're very helpful. And they're not talking free man on the land or sovereign citizen narrative. They're talking law. They're talking about how the IRS works. They're talking about facts and verified research that I have done. They're not talking belief systems, pseudo law, free man or sovereign language, which has got no verifiable merit or track record. No, they're talking about deeply technical things that I can evidence are true. And there's nearly 50 research papers there. Now, somebody who's only able to write word soup wouldn't write 50 research papers, would they?
No.
Publish them.
No.
And there's books on Amazon that I've written that people are buying about, you know, how they can do this, that, and the other on the Monopoly board. Why would Amazon host my books if they were all word soup? Yeah. Then you've got verified results. Okay, fine. In the first few years, I've been through this endlessly. We didn't get a lot of results in the first few years of freedom.
And we've held our hands up about that.
Simon Goldberg sent in a Trojan horse, and Andy Jackman. I've been through this endless times. I wasn't an expert in the ways of the Monopoly board in the first few years of Matrix Freedom. I've said this honestly, because it's the truth, right? I've become an expert now. I've been doing this for many years. You don't become an expert overnight.
No.
Not in this subject, you don't. Well, not in any subject, but especially in this subject. So there are results. Members of ours have had checks from the IRS. Members of ours have had tax discharges. We've just had one recently for $480,000 US tax discharged. So we've had recoupment. People have had checks. Yeah, not everybody. And I've also explained that endlessly on my webinars and my blogs and my memos and my membership newsletters and things of that time. We've
done a video ourselves on that. So we've done an update on where we are at within that process as well, which is probably a good 2 hours worth of deep dive, broken down content that you can watch on the media platform as well. So it's not like we've been hiding any of this from the members. We've been very open about it.
Look, I just tell it the way it is, right? I don't have things to hide. If anybody thinks that they're going to find something about me that isn't already written about on the internet, then I know everything that's been written. It's about me. I'm going to know about it, aren't I? And I'm going to tell you that since 2010, 99% of it is not based on any fact or reality. It is based on perception. It is based on a narrative that started in 2010 when they started publishing newspaper articles, television programs, radio programs, and internet. That's like a momentum. It's like an oil tanker. It starts off, it's traveling along, and it gets a load of momentum. You try and turn that oil tanker around.
Yeah.
It ain't going to be easy, is it?
No.
That's what's been going on. And the likes of Dan Needle, the likes of Open Democracy, all they do is jump onto that oil tanker that's already traveling in that direction, and they feel safe on that oil tanker because they're not the only ones who are saying this stuff. There's all these other people saying it as well. And if you are extremely lazy, like Dan Needle evidently is, just by looking at all the blogs that he puts out there and how many people he calls scammers and fraudsters, because it's not just me, there's others as well.
Yeah.
If you are somebody who doesn't need to do any research, because all you've got to do is get your AI to go and search the internet and find some stories about some targets that you can regurgitate the same nonsense and put it out on your blog, you could probably do that in 5 minutes in the morning and have the rest of the day off.
Yeah.
But none of it is based on fact or reality because you've never interviewed Dan Needle, me. So how is it you think you know all about me when you've never interviewed me? And you've never actually researched the truth. You've just jumped on this oil tanker that's moving in that direction, which is got a momentum of bullshit and lies. Isn't that the darkness? Isn't bullshit, lies, deceptions, isn't that darkness?
100%.
Maybe that's where Dan Needle comes from. I mean, I'll go further, right? Because I don't care whether this is censored or not. For someone to defend the FCA, they have to come from the darkness. There's nothing light and bright about what the FCA do. How can the FCA, I'll break it down, right? I'm going to be brutally honest, right? In the alleged financial crisis, there were hundreds of suicides.
Yeah.
Because people lost everything to the banks.
Yeah.
And the FCA covered it all up for the banks. Do I need to say any more?
No. And that's just one segment.
That's just one little thing.
Yeah.
I could do a whole program with you, Andy,
yeah.
on what the FCA do and don't do, and how they don't actually look after the consumer at all. But Dan Needle, who is vicariously their agent, is protecting them and his club of very powerful financial services organizations. The very same organizations, by the way, who paid Clifford Chance exorbitant amounts of money. I know what they charge because I used to pay it.
Yeah.
So if you are coming from a 20-year career in Clifford Chance and the majority of your clients are big financial services companies, which they are, by the way, who are you going to be protecting if you're Dan Needle? Are you going to be protecting the consumer's interest? Or are you going to be protecting the FCA and the big financial services companies, the very same people that we talked about a little while ago, Andy, who own all your assets? Where all your assets are owned by the banks and you own absolutely nothing. Who are you going to be protecting if you're Dan Needle? The consumer or the big financial services interests and the regulators that are there to protect the big financial services interests?
You mentioned a word a second ago about being vicariously liable. And I know that's something that I wanted to also touch on here, because there is clearly an agency going on here between the likes of Goldberg, the likes of Dan Needle, the FCA. And I want to just bring this back into the frame when we spoke on, and again, this is on a previous interview that we've done where we spoke about the Equalizer redress protocol and where the liability falls here on the likes of Dan Needle. So if he is watching, this bit's for you, because this is important as well for people to realize that you can't just say whatever you want without consequence. So do you want to just talk a little bit about what is vicarious liability and how are we and how are you strategically using the Equalizer redress protocol to address that?
Yeah, well, let's just go back one step, then I'll cover that, right?
Yeah.
Now, one of the things that Dan Needle repeatedly says on his blogs is that I've never won a case in law. Right? He says this repeatedly. I've emailed him with my letter before claim. I'll come back to that in a moment. And he emails back saying, basically, bring it on. You've never won a case. You're a complete and utter fucked up idiot, right? Basically, it's what he says, right? Well, I've got news for you, Dan Needle. I have never lost a case yet. I've had couples struck out in the high courts against mortgage companies, which wasn't, by the way, word soup that I was advancing in my cases. It was the narrative of Carmel Butler, who you can read about in Hansard in 2011, who stood up in Parliament, not word soup, Dan Needle, who stood up in Parliament and said that all the mortgages were fraudulent because of the securitization practices, which I know a great deal about, Dan Needle. Probably know more about it than you'll ever know. That's not word soup, but the High Court struck those cases out because they were inconvenient for the High Court, because they would have lost them if they had actually advanced them any further. So they struck them out. Every other case I've taken on, I've won cases in the Irish Court of Appeal, made landmark history. The annulment of my public company, which was another story for another day. I reversed that, made legal history in Ireland, in the High Courts in Ireland, and then in the Court of Appeal in Ireland. 14 court hearings I did with no lawyers, and beat a King's Counsel. How about the case in Bermuda that I won in the High Court in Bermuda on my own against some fraudsters from South America who tried to take down one of my hedge funds, and I beat them in the Court of Appeal, in the High Court in Bermuda, and got £350,000 compensation. How about that one, Dan? Don't know about that one, do you? How about the other cases I've won? How about the case that I've won in lower courts, in the county courts, in the magistrates' courts? You don't know about those cases, do you, Dan? I could go on about cases I've won. I've never actually lost a case. And I don't win cases by spouting out word soup. My written material, as you will discover, Dan Needle, is equally as good as any law firm that you're ever going to find in the UK or anywhere else, as you're going to find. Because I'm not bad at writing cases in law, because I've had quite a bit of experience of it. So you better know who you're taking on, man, if you're watching this, because you've thrown the gauntlet down, mate, and you've got a battle that you've never had in your entire life, my friend. And
let's talk about that.
Yeah, let me tell you this, Dan Needle. The darkness has never, ever, and never will beat the light. If you think you're going to beat me, my friend, you have got no concept of what you're taking on. And I hope you're looking me in the eye, Dan Needle.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about this battle. Let's talk about the Equalizer redress protocol and what that is as an instrument, what that is in terms of people like Dan, people like Simon Goldberg. Just flesh that out for the audience, would you, Ian? So that, because again, we have spoken about the Equalizer redress protocol on a completely separate video. So it's going to be a case of a condensed version. I get that, because we're sort of 2 hours into this, and I want people to at least have an understanding of what's that vicarious liability and what are you strategically doing about that?
Right, because I understand the law, I understand things like agency, right, which is very critical. It's what they use against us. The living man, woman is the agent for the body corporate birth certificate construct, which, by the way, Dan Needle, is not pseudo law. You can read it in Haresbry's law book if you want, right?
Yeah.
If you care to actually do some research, which you quite clearly don't bother to do. So if you research the law, you will realize that there is something called agency, and you can be vicariously liable as an agent if you support the malicious intent of another. So let's just explore this a bit further, shall we? The FCA have had malicious intent against me since 2009. It's well documented.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a case in the court right now, which can only ever end up in the conclusion of malicious intent behind their fake prosecution. They're entrapment by design. They're, railroading me out of the UK into a lifestyle that I never thought I would have. Living in Indonesia for over a year, now living in North Cyprus, away from my friends and family. 99.9% on my own. Is that not damage to me? Does that not breach my human rights? Is that not a breach of common decency that you would do that and then try to jail me and lock me away forever? Is that not malicious? I say it is. I say the whistleblower who tried to do the right thing is being destroyed by the darkness. That's what I say. You make up your own mind if you're watching this, right? Now, I go on to say that anybody who supports the FCA's narrative, which Dan Needle has done many times on his blogs by quoting Order 34/2023, like it is the only thing you've got to say about Ian Clifford, and you don't have to say any more because he's a convicted criminal. But what if that conviction has no standing in the law? What if you've been using that as a weapon? What if you've been using the narrative that Simon Goldberg has been using for 4 years and joining in and using the same phrases that Simon Goldberg has been using all over his internet blogs and websites and videos? And what if Simon Goldberg has supplied the FCA with the O'Keefe report, which is a fake report that holds a narrative of complete lies and distortions that makes it look as if I am a fraudster? There's no substance to it whatsoever. Supplied to the FCA by Simon Goldberg, and Dan Needle's narrative comes from Simon Goldberg and comes from Southwark Crown Court's sentence. So if you go along with all that and you further push it out all over your blogs and repeat it repeatedly in your narrative, you are now an agent for the same information. And therefore you share the liabilities as the agent in exactly the same way as we talked about, Andy, a few interviews ago, about the living man woman shares the liability of the body corporate that sits on the monopoly board, the corporate construct of the birth
notice
certificate.
To agent is notice to principal. Yeah.
It's the same. So when Dan Needle writes back to me, calling me a fucking idiot who's never won a case, and by the way, you haven't told me what your case is against Dan Needle, is what he says, I have to wonder, how the hell did Dan Needle retain a partnership at Clifford Chance for 20 years when I never even practiced the law, and he did, but I seem to know more about it than he does?
So how does, when it comes to this agency that you've spoken about, how does there's a jurisdictional shift that takes place in this protocol, isn't there, in this redress protocol? How does that shift increase people like Dan Needle's and Simon Goldberg's exposure then? Just so that they understand.
What they haven't realised, because I don't think that either of them are particularly bright, right? They just regurgitate in the same old nonsense. You can't be that bright if that's all you're doing, right? If that's your raison d'etre of what you do, is just to regurgitate nonsense without doing research. I say that is idiotic, right? That's what I say. Okay? Now, if you then look at, if I was to take a court case into the United Kingdom for malicious falsehood and libel, how many judges in the United Kingdom are going to listen to me?
Yeah, I think we know the answer to that one under the current situation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the enemy of the crown, right?
Yeah.
So they're not going to listen to me. They're going to strike the case out. They're going to reverse it. They're going to try and issue a cost order against me, and they'd probably say I'm a nutter that uses word soup, which is what they normally say, right? So how do you solve that problem? Well, the world is a big place, yeah? Now, Ian Clifford is a minister. I am a declared minister of the Republic of Old Souls. I have every right to believe in the Monopoly Board and the game of commerce that I write about in my research papers at Ecclesia Law. I have every right to believe in all those things that I write about. You know, quite frankly, I do believe in them because I've done deep research into them, right?
Yep.
And if I want to talk about them on my webinars or in my books and write about them in my research papers, and other people want to believe in them as well, who is to say they can't believe in those things? That is a religious belief, right?
Yep.
And if you've got more than one that is in your ministry, which, by the way, we've got a lot more than one in our ministry, everybody in that ministry has got the right to believe in whatever it is they want to believe in.
Yep.
So let me put this into context. Let's imagine that the Pope was being spoken about by Dan Needle in the way that Dan Needle speaks on his blogs and podcasts and his documents he pushes out through his Twitter and X feed, right? Just imagine what would happen if Dan Needle started writing 10 articles and blogging all over the place about the Pope is an idiot, the Pope uses word soup, the Pope's a fraudster. Can you imagine what the Catholic Church might do? Now, I don't agree with the Pope. I'm not trying to say I do. But I certainly wouldn't put blogs out about the Pope.
No.
I think there might be some pretty serious consequences for doing it, right?
Yep.
How about the Archbishop of Canterbury? Let's all start blogging about him, shall we? About the beliefs that he's got, yeah? About Christianity. Should we all start blogging about him? Calling him a fraudster? Calling him, somebody that uses word soup in his sermons, yeah? How about, should we do that? Do you think there might be some consequences if we started doing that? How about the Muslim leaders? I see
where you're heading with this. Yeah.
It
goes for any religious belief, doesn't it?
Yeah. How about Jewish leaders? How about the rabbis? Yeah. How about the Amish? I could go on and on and on. Now, inconveniently for people like Dan Needle, who are so arrogant and have got so much hubris that they actually think they can do and say what they like, because they used to earn a few quid when they were at Clifford Chance. By the way, Dan, if you want a pissing contest, I think I earned a lot more than you did, man. If you want a pissing contest, right? Not that I want one, but if you want to have a go, I think I earned a lot more than you did, man. I don't care how much they paid you. I probably earn more in a month than you earn in a year. In my heyday, right? From the heart. You want to have a go, man? You need to know who you're taking on. So if you shift the case into the United States, where Article 1 of the United States Constitution upholds the right of religious belief, which is where I'm taking the case, by the way.
Yeah.
Now we're not talking about the FCA Order 34 anymore, are we?
No.
Now we're talking about my right of religious belief.
We're in a completely different jurisdiction as well.
The fact that I have people that follow my religious belief who also believe the same. So I'm no longer just a guy on a soapbox on the corner of the street spouting out a load of nonsense. No, I've actually got a bit of substance in what I say because other people believe it. And guess what? There's some results to back it up. So maybe it's not just religious rhetoric and belief, maybe, just maybe, it's got some substance. Oh dear, Dan Needle.
So talk to me about moving this to another jurisdiction. What did you mean by that? Because clearly this isn't something that's being done in the UK. So this has been moved into another jurisdiction. How has that been done?
Right. So damages, right? Malicious damage to your character, to your religious beliefs, is an asset. Yeah. A lawsuit that could win is a potential asset, like any potential asset.
Yeah, I get that. Because damages, there's normally a monetary value assigned to the damages, isn't there? If you're suing for damages, it will be for a monetary amount, typically speaking.
Yeah. So again, in the law, it is perfectly lawful to assign your damages. So I have assigned my damages to an international grantor trust.
Okay.
Which, by the way, is an asset fortress protocol.
Yeah.
In the same way as I could assign my my recoupments, or assign my paintings, or assign my stocks and shares, or assign anything, any asset. And now the International Grantor Trust owns the potential damages. The claim of damages is owned by the trust, which is no longer in the UK. So I've moved jurisdiction.
Okay.
To a jurisdiction that is sympathetic to religious belief.
Okay.
Which, by the way, I'm talking about on this Saturday's webinar.
Mm-hmm.
So no longer am I relying upon what some people have said to me is obviously corrupt UK courts who want to railroad me every time I appear or take up a case in the UK court system. I will now be taking up a case in the United States that is sympathetic to religious belief, where there are case precedents won, where people have won because they've had their religious beliefs constrained or criticised.
Okay.
And my religious beliefs have actually got a bit of substance because we have got verified results to back them up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've shifted the case to a different jurisdiction where they are sympathetic to religious belief, where we do have a ministry, we do have envoys, we can prove all of this. It's not speculation or rumour. It is based on the facts of the matter. And if Dan Needle thinks that he is not liable because of what he says and what he's done against an envoy of a ministry, then he really needs to have a look at international law. He needs to look into the persecution of religious figures. He needs to look at all the cases that have won on that basis. And then he might retract his statements to me that I've never won a case, that I speak word soup, that I don't have a fucking clue what I'm doing, and I'm an idiot, according to him, according to his emails that he sent me.
To me, this isn't a dispute about fraud. It's about controlling narrative. That's what this looks like to me. It's about the bigger organizations controlling the narrative, using instances, people like yourself. There's many other people that we could speak about. There's people who've disappeared, people who've lost their lives over the years through seeking truth. And, this is just another incident in a long list of truth seekers that is no different, in my opinion. So when you strip away...
Yeah, I want to spell it out, Andy.
Yeah.
For those who haven't figured it out already, I'll make it really plain, right? I do not like those that operate outside of honour and integrity. To the core of my being, over millenniums, I do not like it. Those people that operate with no honor, with lacking in integrity, cause destruction, cause harm, and cause people anxiety and illness and sometimes death. I don't support that. I support everything that is opposite of that. Why do you think I blew the whistle against HBOS when I could have saved my own organisation and carried on with my lavish 5-star lifestyle that I used to lead? Because I've got integrity. Because it wasn't good enough for me that they'd offered me fortunes to stay on the dark side with them. When I realised that they wanted me on the dark side, I wanted to leave the dark side. Which is why I blew the whistle. How many people have blown the whistle against the top 6 banks from a prominent position? You ain't going to find very many. I was bold enough to do that. I knew what I was doing. I wasn't stupid enough to believe that there was no risk involved. But because I have a deep need to stay with integrity, which was the name of my firm, by the way, I did it for that reason. Why do you think I've tried to solve complex problems all my life since the age of 18? Because I don't like the problems and the consequences that people suffer from the consequences of the problems. Because I have integrity and I want to see people solving their problems, not having more of them. And then you've got someone like Dan Needle. And let's be plain about this. I've said this before, and I'll keep on saying it. How does any lawyer look in the mirror every morning and not realise that what they are doing is representing darkness? I don't care if you're a lawyer and you're watching this. I want you to have a good long look in the mirror. Do you really operate with truth and integrity? Do you really? I say you don't. Because I've had loads of experience of being on the other end of lawyers. Dan Needle is a lawyer. My dad told me when I was a young lad, and I still remember it, don't believe everything lawyers tell you, Ian, because sometimes they lie. Well, wasn't he right? And now you want to go a little bit further and you want to represent the financial services companies that are openly, without anybody challenging them because they've got the regulator in their pocket, taking all the assets from the people. And you want to earn money from doing that? And now you want to earn money by trying to stop me from what I'm doing, which is trying to free people from the egregious UN Agenda 2030. So this is quite simple, Andy. This is a battle of light and dark. It's as simple as that. And Dan Needle has no concept that he might even be on the dark side. He might even be delusionally believing that he's on the light side. I'm here to tell him, right between the eyes, that he is 100% on the dark side and I am 100% on the light side. And that is what this is really about, Andy. It's nothing to do with his blogs, his tweets. I couldn't care less, really, about what he thinks of me. I care about the light and the dark. That's what I care about. That's what I get passionate about. And I think you can probably tell that from the tone of my voice.
I think everybody can, Ian. You know, this has been an ongoing battle between the light and the dark for many, many years when it comes to what we do here, when it comes to the protocols, when it comes to the solutions to the problems that people are facing. And let's be honest, people are bogged down and oppressed and weighed down beyond all belief right now. They really are, emotionally, physically, financially, so many different ways where people don't have the opportunity to live their life to the full, even to follow a passion that they might have. And they may never have the opportunity to do that.
And it's going to get a lot worse. And it's people like Dan Needle that are making it worse by their blogs, by their suppression. I'm not saying that everyone he's written about isn't a rogue. He probably has written about some rogues. But if you get it wrong once, Dan Needle, how many other times have you got it wrong?
Well, in terms of moving forwards from here, my final thoughts are very, very simple. We don't have the luxury of time to waste on this type of narrative, because our time is spent seeking solutions. Your time is spent building them, launching them, testing them, making sure that they don't create more problems for people. And the whole point of the Equalizer project is to make sure that anybody who is openly and admittedly making people's lives worse by the so-called solutions that they peddle in this so-called space of freedom, that we bring that to the forefront, that we continue to whistleblow, that we continue to forge forward with what is the truth, with what does work, with what is going to create solutions for people. Now, if we were frauds, if Ian was a fraudster, if everything that we're doing here at the Republic of Old Souls was just some mighty big ruse, why would we waste time exposing other people within the freedom space for the damage that they're doing? Why would we do that? We've got way better things to be doing with our time. So if you are watching this, I know this has been a long one, but it's certainly for me, it's been an essential one. And it's definitely been an important one for Ian to get this message across. We get it across in bits and bobs here and there, but I think to truly focus on your story from front to back as a living, human, feeling, emotional man, and the fact that, yes, again, people may look at you thinking, oh, he's living the life of Riley in North Cyprus. You're on your own. You're away from your family. I'm sure you'd rather be back here in the UK with your family, with your wife, spending more time with the people that you love, being able to spend time with us as well, who work daily with you, but you're not able to do that. And if people don't really understand those types of sacrifices, all for the cause of truth, all for the cause of the light, all for the cause of freedom, then we don't want you around, quite frankly.
No,
I would much rather you go off and do something else and let us carry on with what we're doing here. So we're going to continue shooting these videos. We're going to continue making sure that people are held accountable for their dark actions. And that goes for the likes of Simon Goldberg. It goes for the likes of Dan Needle, whoever it is. We'll continue to push forwards with the work that we do. And we'll continue to shoot these videos and bring the information to you guys. And if you align with this, fantastic. Because if you do, then you're definitely a true seeker and somebody that is wanting freedom from the matrix and from the system that, as you've said, Ian, is only going to get worse as we go on. So what I would encourage you to do is, if you do feel that way, then stick around. Look at the content. Share the content is what I would also say. Let's get this message of light and truth out there. Because one thing that we've come to realize is that it's not just the likes of Ian that is being suppressed. It's the messaging and the content and the information and the education that we are trying to deliver that is also being suppressed. These types of videos don't get millions of views. They just don't. We'd love it if they did. Yeah. This content gets shadow banned. It gets suppressed by algorithms. So if you're watching this and you truly believe that what we're doing here has substance behind it and that has integrity and that does provide solutions for people and that will provide a better quality of life, why would you not want to share that information? So please do that. Share it on socials. share it on your channels. Let's get this message out there to as many people as possible, because all we're trying to do is help. So I'm going to leave it on that note. Ian, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Well, we've said a lot. There's a lot more to do. There's a lot more to say. There's one thing that is very dominant in me is that I won't give up on this. If they want to get rid of what I'm doing, they're going to have to get rid of me, because I'm not going anywhere, right? So it doesn't matter how many damn needles come along with their fake narrative and their bullshit, their deficient journalism. It's never going to stop me doing what I'm doing. And we have got a lot of people that actually buy into what we're doing very passionately. So it's not just Ian and Andy having a chat on a video. There's a lot of others that actually are tuned in with what we're doing, right? And that audience will get bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's always going to be idiots like Dan Needle who are going to copy and paste bullshit from somebody else and put it out there to try and make a name for themselves. But you know what? I'd rather be the guy who made a positive difference than made a negative one. And I'll leave you on that thought.
All right. Well, Ian, thank you for joining me again. It's been an eye-opener, as always. There's been some stuff that you've shared today that I wasn't aware of. And I hope that you've enjoyed watching. And if you have enjoyed watching, like I've said, please come back to the channel, watch the other videos that we've done, look at the protocols, because they do work, and spread the word. It's essential that we get this message out there. So until the next episode, I wish you a good day, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye for now.